Holy news dump, Batman. If you missed it late Friday night, Judge Claudia Wilkins signed off on the House settlement. What does it mean for BYU? How do they compete in the post-House world? And quite frankly, how do they pay out at least $20.5 million to their athletes this coming year? We're talking about all the implications for the BYU Cougars.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, executive producer of the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah, and a 13-year credentialed media member at BYU. I am your resident BYU expert and insider on this podcast, and as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. All right, coming up on today's show, the House settlement is fully in effect. We have finally entered a new era of college athletics, and it begins formally on July 1st, but some of the implications began the second the judge's ink was dry on her final summary judgment. But then we'll also talk about what it means for BYU. How do they compete in this post-House settlement world? How do they pay out $20.5 million in an athletic budget that has never seen probably that big of an addition to one individual class? And then we'll also talk about what the implications and the impact will be on you as a Cougar fan. All right, so right out of the chute, if you missed it, the House settlement is something you probably have heard about for months now. And what it is the formal settlement of at least 3 antitrust cases levied against the NCAA that sought money to pay for athletes that competed as far back as 2016 for their name, image, and likeness, making money off these athletes. And obviously the NCAA restricting set opportunities for athletes to make money off of that. It unrestricts, obviously, future potential earning for athletes because the NCAA will no longer have a say in this. And it's created now in the aftermath of this where they have the College Sports Commission, where we now have, for lack of a better term, a commissioner running college athletics, particularly at the Power 4 level, of which BYU is a member. The biggest thing to note about this is there is a $20.5 million revenue share that's coming into effect beginning July 1. And that $20.5 million is money coming directly from universities to their athletes. Now, it's up to $20.5 million. Not every athletic department out there, you're not expected to pay at $20.5 million. That's not the requirement. You can spend up to that. That is the cap of what you're able to pay out to your athletes. Now, a number of Big 12 programs, a number of SEC, ACC, and Big 10 programs have already pledged they will pay the full allotment of that money. The podcast we did last week, if you're an everydayer, comments from the Big 12 spring meetings from Brian Santiago's own lips said that BYU is going to be, quote, competitive when it came to this House settlement and up to the $20.5 million. I think it is an abject mistake if BYU is not able to pay the full $20.5 million allotment. If you are seen as being at a program that can't pay out a full allotment of this money, but you've been competing and paying out multiple millions of dollars in NIL, where is the rub there? That doesn't square up with how BYU is perceived right now. And especially in this new era, you want to be perceived as a strength in terms of the Big 12. You want to be perceived as a power program, and that requires spending money. So no matter how it comes, BYU's got to find a way to pay the full allotment, I think, day one. But the bigger point is that's a lot of money. And that's a lot of money for a lot of college athletic departments to be able to pay out. We saw during the 2010s a real big boom in college athletics, whether it was paying top dollar to coaching staffs, building all kinds of glitzy, fantastic edifices, I call them, to various sports, football programs in particular, building these incredible headquarters and having slides in them and nap centers and pods and all kinds of ostentatious stuff. Well, guess what? The bills are going to start coming due on those. And oh, by the way, the NCAA, with one stroke, a signature of a judge, has now just carved into your athletic department budget, if you want to compete at the highest level, another $20.5 million you have to pay out. That's going to require some programs and some athletic departments to take haircuts in various areas, whether that's staff, whether it's budgets for different things. You're going to see them get creative in terms of being able to pay this out. But I actually think BYU, they should be in a position of strength to pay this out day one because, quite frankly, BYU's never had as much money coming into their athletic department as they have right now. If you know what I'm talking about, I call it the EADA report. It comes from the Department of Education every single year, and it allots how much various schools, BYU among them, how much revenue they report coming into athletics. Well, in 2023, BYU's last year as a football independent and members of the West Coast Conference, they reported revenues of $106 million. Now, the most recent number came out for 2024-2025, which is the first year in the Big 12 for BYU. Those numbers came out to the BYU made $130 million in revenue. And obviously, a lot of that was reinvested in paying out higher salaries to various staff for BYU, and obviously paying out the off the field staff, improving nutrition, all the different things BYU's tried to do behind the scenes to improve the overall quality of life and the overall performance of their various athletic departments, programs inside the athletic department. The bigger point is, you can expect when those new EADA numbers come out next year for 2025, that revenue number is going to continue to climb. BYU is flush with cash, at least in theory here, and so long as they have been smart with their money and the way that BYU operates their athletic department, I've got no reason to think that they aren't. They're going to have the money to pay out this full allotment, because the other side of it is BYU was, we called it a half-share member of the Big 12 for their first 2 years in the conference. They made $18 million the first year. They made $19 million this year. But beginning next year, this coming year, BYU will get a full share allotment of the media rights still, which is expected to be north of $31 million. That's at least $12 million in change that you didn't have budgeted in probably right away that you can formally add to the pot here. BYU is going to be just fine. And with the amount of money that BYU's been accustomed to kind of running their athletic department with versus what they can expect going forward here, I think that they can build it into their budget and fit it much easier than many athletic departments out there are going to be able to do. As I mentioned, we have seen so many athletic departments. I would venture to say 90+% of them operate at a deficit, operate in the red. BYU is one of the relative few who operate in the black. And it's just because BYU has been essentially told by main campus that you have to eat what you kill. You make the money, you spend what you have, but you have to live within your own means. There are no tithing dollars or anything else coming from the university itself to bail you out if you find yourself in a bad situation. And does that mean BYU has gone without on different things for many, many years? Absolutely. Have they upgraded other places because they've had more money coming into the athletic department? Yes, they have. And football is chief among them. You can expect that BYU will absorb this hit much easier than I think a lot of athletic departments out there. And that should at least give BYU a leg up in being able to compete at a high level. Because the other side of this is, some of you are probably asking, well, Jake, is $20.5 million, does it take the place of NIL? No, it does not. Cougar Connect, the Royal Blue, the two main collectives for BYU athletes, they will still exist, and they'll still be able to formalize NIL deals. But what do those NIL deals look like? How are they going to operate? And how are they separate, obviously, from this $20.5 million? It's a great question you ask. We're going to answer that next as we roll on right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, the NBA playoffs, the NBA finals are in full swing, my friends, and every night is delivering highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. All of us, I think, are glued to the TV when it comes to this. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout play, there's never been a better time to get in on the action and do it with our friends at FanDuel. They make it easy to get in the game before tip-off and during the game as well when it's live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And whether you have a bead on, you feel like a player that's going to emerge maybe in the second half or an individual quarter, or would like to combine your live prop bets mid-game based on how the action unfolds and put them into a same-game parlay, get you an extra payout. But also the best part is, how could $200 in bonus bets add to that excitement if your first $5 bet hits? I would imagine it would add a little bit to the excitement. If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you get $200 in bonus bets just like that. No questions asked. It's as simple as it comes. And the best part is, you can make every moment more and do it with our friends at FanDuel. They are an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you have not done so already, please continue to subscribe, rate, review, share it with your family and friends. Let them know that this is BYU content available on the daily, on demand, wherever you get your podcasts. And the best part is, I love bringing it to you guys. So all the support you guys lend, I really do appreciate it, and hope that many more of you in coming days and weeks will be joining us on an everyday basis. That's the best part about this, is it's available every single day. All right. So I just talked about the $20.5 million and how that's going to affect college athletics and how I feel like BYU is going to be able to absorb that hit better than many athletic departments out there. Now, the question is, does NIL still exist in this post-house settlement world? It absolutely does. And the thing is, I have seen certain people out there that have been saying, hey, BYU's supposed advantages in NIL are going away as a result of this house settlement era. In theory, I guess they could, but the bigger deal is, as part of the settlement, they have now established a clearinghouse that any NIL deal that has a net worth of over $600. So whether that is a media appearance deal, autograph signing, anything that's worth more than $600 has to go through this clearinghouse they're calling NIL Go. It's being run by Deloitte Consulting, and the simple fact is that Deloitte Consulting will look at these deals and establish what they consider to be fair market values for various things, and essentially either A, approve the deal, B, reject the deal, or you can send it to arbitration where it gets appealed by both sides and they come to a figure that is, in theory, what this deal is supposed to be worth. Is this going to hold up? No, it's not, because the second that this NIL Go essentially disapproves and rejects a deal of any high number of any variety that a legal mind thinks is worth taking up as a legal case, it's going to get sued into oblivion. BYU has a number of NIL partners out there, and there are various companies here in Utah and beyond who are very intent on continuing to help BYU compete at a national level, and that is being able to pay out athletes via NIL. They will put together deals, and they will go through this clearinghouse. Will BYU be the first one that has NIL Go tied up in litigation? I highly doubt that, but I know that BYU athletes, if they were worried about their NIL opportunities going away, that's not going away. I have it on very good authority from BYU administrators that the expectation is with this house settlement, NIL is not going anywhere. Now, can you pay a guy multiple millions of dollars just for one or two appearances at your car dealership, for example? No, that probably won't pass that sniff test and probably won't match up with fair market value. But I also question, what does Deloitte know about college athletics? What do they know that is fair market value for various things? That's the big question that has to be answered. The nice part is I'm sure that BYU and their partners, whether it's these companies out there, people working with the collectives and the like, have already been working on putting together contracts and deals that will pass this sniff test. I'm sure they have an idea of what fair market value is or what it's expected to be from this clearinghouse. They probably have had some feedback coming in. And you can expect that people that think that BYU is not going to be competitive in this post-house settlement world, they're up in the night. BYU is still going to compete. They're going to compete very favorably because the boosters that have the money that want to pay BYU athletes and want to make it so that BYU can compete at a national level, they're not going anywhere. That's the thing about this I don't get is that people think that BYU's, I call them air quotes, supposed advantages are going away. They're not going away. They're just changing a little bit. And yes, there may be a deal here and there that gets nixed because this Deloitte Consulting decides that it doesn't pass what they consider to be fair market value. Well, guess what? You go back to the negotiating table and you make it square up and then you resubmit it. How does it affect this podcast, for example? I have had Connor Pay on this podcast for the better part of 2 years with an NIL deal that he and I sat down and hammered out ourselves. We had Clark Barrington on before that. I've done 3 straight seasons of having these offensive linemen on the show, and I've paid them for their appearances. How does it affect going forward with this? Well, if I come to it and I have an athlete or a couple of athletes that I'm interested in, we'll get a contract together. We'll submit it to NIL Go, and we'll see what they say. I don't think that my contract with any of these players is going to be rejected on the grounds that it doesn't pass market value, but maybe it does. I'm going to be a guinea pig in this, it feels like, and we'll see how it all shakes out. And obviously I'll be keen to pass along anything I learn as I work in the space. But the bigger point is that BYU is going to continue to have athletes cashing in on their name, image, and likeness. And yeah, the $20.5 million that comes as a revenue share, it's just another pot of money for these athletes. We've talked about it on this podcast. I've mentioned it multiple times. If you think that college athletics is being ruined by money, I don't know what I can do to help you out with that, because guess what? They just added $20+ million to these athletes' pockets, and 80 to 90% of that money is going to football and basketball. And I would say in most cases, it's minimum. It feels like 70% is going to football. maybe 10 to 20% go into basketball. Maybe that remaining 10% of that $20 million gets allotted to everybody else in the athletic department. I fully expect BYU to operate that way. I fully expect many athletic departments to operate that way. And those of you asking, well, how does it get affected by Title IX? Well, in the dying days of the Biden administration, they said that it was going to be subject to Title IX. Well, the Trump administration came into office, and all of a sudden there was a reversal of that ruling from the Biden administration and from the education department, saying that these revenues are not required to pass up to the level 9 level. Title IX level, I should say. Title IX will not have an impact on these revenues being doled out. And that's the way that you're able to pay, as said, 80 to 90% of your $20.5 million allotment to football and basketball players while paying relative pennies. Now it's not pennies because 10% of 20 million is still $2 million being doled out, but you get what I'm talking about. The other side of it is BYU will have contracts with these athletes. I know that the football program, they've been drawing up these contracts for quite some time. Maybe they haven't signed them formally until now, but now you will have essentially a contract, whether you're a defensive back, an offensive lineman, a running back, or a quarterback. What you are is you will essentially sit down. BYU will pass a paper across the table to you and say, we BYU are willing to pay you X insert athlete name here this much money as part of our allotment. Now you're paid that much money via the revenue share. You already get your full scholarship. You get your cost of living stipend. You get your Alston case money, which is obviously paying multiple thousands of dollars. And now, yeah, it could be somewhere in the hundreds of $1,000s to up to $1 million, it feels like, if you're a top shelf athlete when it comes to this house settlement era. But then beyond that, if a company wants to reward you and wants you to make appearances at their dealership, I guess I use car dealers as an example, but it could be anything. You could go and be a spokesperson in commercials for a local company and that like. NIL is not going anywhere. And BYU will continue to be able to reward their athletes, if you're a company out there that wants to do so, richly. And obviously, like I said, it has to go through the formal process of being approved by this clearinghouse. But to think that we're all speaking collectively as college athletics going to abide by these rules and there's not going to be any, hijinks going on, it's going to happen. And like I said, I expect the NIL Go will be sued into oblivion at some point because there's going to be some athlete somewhere who has a deal nix and they're going to be upset about it. They're going to hire a lawyer, and that lawyer is going to say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get a household name for myself. I'm going to have billable hours for days. If you think that settlements and lawsuits and the like have gone by the wayside in this era of college athletics, they've gone nowhere. And in fact, it could get worse in many respects if athletes aren't getting what they feel like is the money that's owed to them. This is supposed to allow athletes to make the money that's been withheld from them for years. But in some ways, it may actually tie up more money than the NCAA cares to really acknowledge, and could find themselves once again in the crosshairs with a whole nother set of lawsuits. That's kind of what the reality of this is. And it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel good for anybody out there, but hey, we're talking about a sport and a college athletics universe out there that really it's unregulated, and it has been unregulated for quite some time. This is in theory supposed to bring regulation with this house settlement, but in some ways it just changes the regulations to maybe where it gets sued once again, and we have a whole nother future coming in some short order. But for now, this is the era we're existing in. And my overall point I should make is that if you think BYU's supposed advantages are going anywhere, they're not. BYU will continue to compete very favorably. And in fact, it actually may help BYU in some level at being even more advantageous because, as I mentioned, they'll be able to pay out the money more readily in terms of the athletic department. And also, they've got a lot of partners out there in the NIL space who are still very capable and ready to pay athletes as well. All right. Final question I want to answer on today's show, and I've been kind of hitting different things coming to my mind as we hit this, but how does it affect you, the fan? Quite frankly, where is it going to hit you in the pocketbook? Well, there's not a clear answer on that quite yet, but I have an idea of how it's most directly going to impact college fans and BYU fans in particular. And we'll finish up today's podcast on that note next. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And if you have not done so already, sign up for the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Get the inside scoop on all things BYU sports. I've got for you guys every single day. And the best part is it comes to your phone in the form of a text message. You get the updates. You're not having to go to a message board. You're not having to log onto a website to get the intel that you crave. And the best part is it's a swinging deal from my perspective, just $5 a month to be a part of it. And the kicker is you get a 14-day free trial, 2 full weeks if you want to be a part of the Insiders Group. So hope that you guys, if you've been on the fence, we'll sign up now and stay apprised of everything going on in BYU sports, because we're heading into a really, really big football season. It doesn't feel like it's that far off. And if you guys want to be a part of it, sign up for the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Links are in the show notes below. All right. So how does the House settlement affect you, the Cougar fan out there who wants to just go watch BYU football, BYU basketball, insert whatever BYU sport you're into? Well, simply put, right now, we're already seeing the impacts of it. If you did not see it, when BYU joined the Big 12, they essentially reseated all of LaVell Edwards Stadium, particularly the East and West stands. And people that had seats for literally decades from the literal building of the Cougar Stadium, and their parents or their grandparents, paid out money and got lifetime seat guarantees from BYU Athletics for the seats they held on to for years, were seeing their seats taken away and paid out to the highest bidder. We've seen it in BYU basketball not once. We're already seeing it a second time because they're going to reseat the Marriott Center this season as well. The ticket prices alone are going to continue to increase, and they will continue to increase until supply outpaces demand, because the demand, folks, it is incredible. BYU has a waiting list, and they've had a waiting list, I think, of some note, I'm sure, for top shelf seats at various venues, particularly LaVell Edwards Stadium and the Marriott Center, for athletics for many, many years. But now that BYU's in the Big 12, you got AJ DeBonsa playing basketball. You've got a BYU football program under Kalani Sitake. They went 11-2 last year. Both programs finished ranked in the top 15. In fact, both finished 13th in the national polls this past season, the respective seasons, speaking of men's basketball and football. How it's going to affect you as a Cougar fan, it's going to get more expensive to watch the team you want to watch in person. And that's unfortunate, because I speak from a position of privilege. I will freely acknowledge it. I go to sporting events on a press pass. I am paid to be there. I'm not paying. I am paid to be there. That is an advantage that thousands of you would kill for. And I get it. I freely acknowledge that. The way that this is going to play out is that you're going to see increases in ticket prices. You're going to see increases in overall Cougar Club memberships if you want to maintain various status when it comes to being able to buy tickets at a certain level. It is going to affect the very way that you support the Cougars. And some of you, unfortunately, as sad as it is to say, are going to be forced to watch from home and support the Cougars from your couch. Now, some of those nights when it's 20 degrees outside, it seems like at LaVell Edwards Stadium, that maybe is a decent proposition. But when it's those September nights when it's like 65 degrees out, there's that kind of that little nip of chill in the air, and you're like, this is football weather. Missing out on that and being among 60,000+ fans at LES when the Cougars are rocking and rolling and playing Big 12 football, that's going to be tough to stomach for some of you who, as I said, are going to get priced out here. That's the interesting part about this, is how long until supply outpaces demand and essentially BYU is forced to kind of backtrack on increasing ticket prices and reseeding these various venues. That's the question I have. The other side of it is BYU probably has had for years plans, and they've alluded to it. I know that Tom Homo did, about wanting to upgrade various facilities, particularly LaVell Edwards Stadium, do things with the Marriott Center. Those two buildings have been around for quite a while. The Marriott Center, if I'm not mistaken, was the late 60s when the footings were poured for it. It was finished in the early 70s. Cougar Stadium, now LaVell Edwards Stadiums, the footings for that were poured in the 1960s. Its current iteration of the 60,000+ fans it can seat was put together in the 1980s. It's 40+ years since we have seen a real, I guess we'd call it an expansion of these facilities. And the question is, what else can they do? Now that you have to carve out $20.5 million into your budget, that probably takes away maybe some of the plans immediately that BYU had to upgrade and maybe retrofit some of these facilities. I hope it doesn't too much, because we know that BYU will always operate in the black, because that's just the prerogative. That's what's been demanded of them for years. But those of you, and yours truly included, that have wanted to see a facelift for LaVell Edwards Stadium, that may be years off now because of the fact they have to pay out more money. But the way to make up the difference, pass it along to the fans. And that's it's no fault of anybody's out there, it feels like. And quite frankly, I look at it as BYU's just trying to compete in a space that all of us have wanted them to compete at. That's the other thing about this. I have long advocated, I've wanted to see BYU compete at a national level, compete at the top shelf of college athletics. Well, that opportunity is here. And you know what comes associated with that is millions upon millions of dollars that in added increases in terms of staff, nutrition, facilities, and the like. And those bills, they get shuffled off onto the fan, and it's not fair. It's not fun. It carves into budgets that some of you out there may be living on a fixed budget, and you have a certain amount of money you can set aside to go and support the Cougars. And for those of you who have not been priced out quite yet, how long until you are priced out? I'm not trying to stand on a soapbox and say that BYU is wrong for doing this. In fact, I don't think BYU is wrong at all in this. BYU has been very careful about making sure that they don't completely alienate the 80% in terms of favoring everybody else that are the high price boosters. Your perception may differ, but I think that BYU's tried to make it fairly even-handed about how they go about this. But the tough part is we're seeing the reseeding of these various venues, and it feels like it's only the beginning of that. It's going to continue for the foreseeable future. And if you want to continue to support the Cougars at a top shelf level and be there in person, well, get ready to shell out even more money than you already may be accustomed to doing, because it just feels like the more this becomes an arms race and BYU wants to compete in it, yeah, BYU will always try and, I think, mitigate how much it impacts the lay fan. But there's only so much they can do before it really does impact the bottom line for the various fans out there. I'm curious if you hear your feedback on this. Am I right about this? Are you seeing the impact of it already? Or do you expect the impact to hit you at some point, as soon as maybe this basketball season with this reseeding? Because I've already heard from some of you out there in our insiders group and otherwise who have said that even at your current donation level in the Cougar Club and the like, you're looking at maybe going from the lower bowl all the way to the upper bowl at the Marriott Center. And some of you have told me that. I'm astounded, because I know the levels you guys donate at for the college, to the Cougar Club and the like, to maintain status that gives you access to those tickets. It's a crazy, crazy time, and welcome to the new era of college athletics. We want to see BYU compete for national championships. Well, this is kind of the law of unintended consequences of it, because quite simply put, it prices out a lot of fans, and you have to change your whole way you go about supporting the Cougars, because you may not be at LaVell Edwards Stadium. You may not be in the Marriott Center. You may not be able to get out to South Field, etc., to support the Cougars. And it will have an impact, I think, on the next generation of Cougar fans out there. And I hope that it doesn't have so much of an impact that we see, essentially, like I said, the supply finally at some point outpace the demand, because that's a bad deal for everybody involved, particularly when, well, maybe not for the fan, but for BYU, that's when all of a sudden you're looking at it and saying, okay, our revenue increases have dried up. Now what do we do? Well, that would obviously push it back onto the fan yet again. So really, really tough situation, and no easy answer to it, but we're watching BYU transform right in front of us. And in this post-house settlement world, it feels like the costs, they're only going up. All right, that is going to do it for today's edition of the podcast. Appreciate every single one of you who checked this out and watch this show, support it, rate, review it, do everything you do to support the podcast. It really does mean the world to us, because that's the way that's our lifeblood. You are the lifeblood of this podcast. So as always, truthfully, thank you, as I often say, for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And as always, thank you to all of you who are everydayers right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.